Welcome back. Today's episode will be meeting Jasmine Ford, a determined 32-year-old businesswoman who turns humiliation into a game-changing triumph. Despite being kicked from first class on a flight from Los Angeles to New York due to bias, Jasmine's secret network and unwavering resolve lead to an unexpected twist. 7 minutes later, she seizes control of the airline with the help of Clint Eastwood. You won't believe how one act of prejudice ignited a revolution. Hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories coming your way. The hum of the airplane engines filled the cabin, a steady rhythm beneath the quiet murmur of passengers settling into their seats. Outside, the California sun blazed against the tarmac, casting long shadows across the runway as final preparations were made for takeoff. First class was a picture of quiet luxury. Polished leather seats, the crisp scent of fresh linens, the delicate clink of champagne flutes as flight attendants moved with practiced grace. But for Jasmine Ford, none of it mattered. She wasn't here for the luxury. She was here for something bigger. Then, it happened. A sharp voice cut through the air. "Ma'am, I need to see your boarding pass." Jasmine looked up, her dark eyes steady, unreadable. Tara Lawson, a flight attendant with too much authority and too little patience, loomed over her. A moment later, Jasmine's first-class ticket was dismissed as a mistake. "You'll have to move," Tara insisted, her tone edged with something unspoken, something Jasmine had heard before. Eyes followed as she was led past the rows of privilege, past the soft glow of golden cabin lights, into the cramped space of economy. Humiliated, but not defeated, Jasmine tightened her grip on her bag. 7 minutes. That's all it would take. Jasmine Ford didn't just walk, she moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had fought for every inch of ground beneath her feet. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, the cool blast of air conditioning brushed against her skin, a sharp contrast to the Los Angeles heat radiating from the tarmac outside. Dressed in a sleek navy blazer over a fitted dress, she looked every bit the powerhouse she had become, poised, self-assured, and completely unshaken by the watchful glances that trailed her. The faint scent of jet fuel lingered in the air, mingling with the expensive cologne of first-class passengers as they settled into their seats. For Jasmine, this flight wasn't just another trip, it was a carefully chosen moment. She had spent years building herself from the ground up, pushing past every closed door, every condescending glance, every whispered assumption. But no matter how high she climbed, she had learned one unshakable truth: some people still thought they had the power to decide who belonged and who didn't. As she reached her seat, she placed her leather bag in the overhead compartment, her fingers grazing the cool metal. She didn't know it yet, but in just minutes, she would be forced to make a decision that would change everything. The moment the flight attendant stopped beside her seat, Jasmine felt the shift in the air. It was subtle, an imperceptible tightening of the atmosphere, a hush in the low murmur of first-class passengers sipping their pre-flight champagne. The scent of citrus and vanilla from the warm towels drifted through the cabin, masking the tension coiling between them. Tara Lawson, with her perfectly pinned blonde bun and a name tag that gleamed under the cabin lights, leaned in just enough to make Jasmine feel like an intruder in a place she had every right to be. "Ma'am, I need to see your boarding pass." Her voice was smooth, professional, but Jasmine had heard that tone before. The kind that carried a quiet challenge, an unspoken test she'd been forced to pass her entire life. She handed over the crisp, printed ticket without hesitation, her expression unreadable. Tara scanned it once, then again, her frown deepening. "There's been a mistake. You'll need to move." Jasmine blinked, her grip tightening around the armrest. "No, there hasn't." Her voice was calm, controlled. But Tara had already made her decision. Within seconds, the world shrank. Eyes turned, whispering voices rose, and the polished walls of first class felt smaller, colder. As Jasmine was ushered down the aisle, past indifferent faces, the humiliation settled deep in her chest. She had been here before. But this time, she wasn't just going to accept it. This time, she had a plan. Jasmine barely had time to register the shift in tone before it happened. One moment, she was adjusting her seatbelt, the soft leather cool against her fingertips, the next, a shadow loomed over her. "Ma'am, I need to see your boarding pass." The words weren't a request. They were a test. She looked up, meeting the sharp, assessing gaze of flight attendant Tara Lawson. The woman's crisp uniform was flawless, her polished nails tapping impatiently against the seat in front of Jasmine. Around them, first-class passengers sipped their mimosas, the delicate clink of glasses blending with the faint hum of the engines warming up. The scent of expensive perfume hung in the air, thick and cloying. Jasmine handed over her boarding pass without a word. Tara's lips pressed into a thin line as she scanned it. Twice. Then, with an air of quiet finality, she exhaled sharply. "There's been a mistake. You'll need to move." Jasmine's pulse remained steady, but her grip on the armrest tightened. "That's impossible." "My seat was confirmed." Tara barely concealed the flicker of something behind her eyes. Was it annoyance? Suspicion? It didn't matter. "The main cabin is this way." And just like that, she was being escorted away. Past the linen-draped tables, past the indifferent stares, past everything she had rightfully earned. But Jasmine wasn't leaving defeated. No, she was already counting the seconds. 7 minutes. That was all it would take. Whispers rippled through the cabin like a slow-moving current, hushed but undeniable. A few passengers stole glances over their champagne flutes, their curiosity flickering between discomfort and silent approval. Others kept their eyes down, pretending not to notice as Jasmine was led past them, the soft click of her heels muffled against the plush carpet. The first-class cabin, once warm with golden light and quiet luxury, now felt clinical, sterile, detached. The air smelled of citrus and leather, but beneath it lingered the sharp sting of humiliation. Jasmine didn't let it show. She wouldn't. Instead, she inhaled deeply, her pulse steady, her expression unreadable. The flight attendant guiding her, one she hadn't even caught the name of, kept her voice clipped, efficient, but the damage had already been done. A few more steps and first class was behind her. The moment she stepped into the main cabin, the world felt different. The air was heavier, tinged with the scent of reheated meals and too many bodies pressed into too little space. A man coughed nearby. A baby's cry echoed from somewhere in the back. The seats were closer, the lighting harsher. Jasmine slid into the middle seat, her hands smoothing the fabric of her dress. She reached into her bag, fingers brushing over her phone. Then, with a slow, deliberate breath, she sent a single message. 7 minutes. That's all it would take. Jasmine sat still, her face unreadable, but beneath her calm exterior, the gears were already turning. The glow of her phone screen illuminated her fingers as she typed, her movements swift and precise. The scent of stale coffee and recycled air filled the economy cabin, a stark contrast to the polished elegance she had just been forced out of. Around her, passengers shifted in their seats, lost in books, movies, or restless sleep. No one knew that in the next few minutes, the course of this flight, and the fate of an entire airline, was about to change. She hit send. One message. One signal. Beyond the cabin walls, thousands of feet below, a chain reaction had already begun. A quiet buzz through private channels, a notification lighting up the phone of a man sitting in a Manhattan high-rise, a conversation unfolding in hushed tones among executives who suddenly found themselves in crisis mode. Jasmine closed her eyes, leaning back into her seat as if settling in for a nap. But she wasn't resting, she was waiting. 7 minutes. That was all it would take. She opened her eyes just as the first ripple reached the crew. A subtle shift in their movements. A brief, urgent exchange near the galley. Then, the unmistakable tension in the flight attendant's stance. Jasmine exhaled slowly, the hint of a smile forming at the corner of her lips. Now, the real flight was about to begin. Tara Lawson's confidence wavered the moment she saw the senior flight attendant, Mark Ellis, rush toward the galley with a phone pressed tightly to his ear. His face, usually relaxed from years of experience, was tense, jaw locked, shoulders stiff. The cabin lights flickered softly above, casting sharp shadows across the narrow aisle as he turned to her, his voice clipped and urgent. "We have a situation." Tara's stomach tightened. What kind of situation? Mark didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the economy section, toward Jasmine. Tara followed his gaze and found the woman sitting with perfect stillness, her eyes fixed out the window as if she had all the time in the world. Then, the intercom crackled to life. "Senior crew, please report to the cockpit immediately." Passengers stirred, exchanging confused glances. A man in first class adjusted his cufflinks and murmured to his seatmate. In economy, a mother hushed her toddler, sensing the shift in the air. The steady hum of the engine suddenly felt louder, as if the entire plane was bracing for something. Tara's pulse pounded. She had seen mid-flight emergencies before, but this wasn't turbulence or a medical scare, this was something else. Something bigger. She turned back to Mark, but he was already moving. And then, just like that, Tara knew, whatever had just happened, she wasn't in control anymore. Tara stood frozen, her breath shallow as the first-class curtain swished open. The sound barely registered over the pounding in her ears. Standing at the front of the cabin, flanked by two senior crew members and a passenger who had appeared out of nowhere, was a man she immediately recognized, Clint Eastwood. The cabin lights glowed dimly around him, casting long shadows across his weathered face, his sharp gaze locking onto her like a gunfighter sizing up his opponent. The hushed murmurs of first-class passengers filled the air, mixing with the soft chime of the intercom signaling another incoming transmission. "Ms. Lawson," Clint's voice was steady, calm, but there was something razor-sharp beneath it. "I believe you made an unfortunate decision tonight." Tara's throat tightened. The walls of the airplane felt like they were closing in, the recycled air suddenly too thick, too suffocating. She shot a glance toward Mark, but his face was unreadable. "Do you know who Miss Ford is?" Clint continued, his words slow, deliberate. Tara forced herself to look at Jasmine, who remained seated, legs crossed, her gaze unwavering. Her silence said everything. The answer came seconds later, not from Clint, but from the flight deck. "Attention crew," the captain's voice rang through the speakers, controlled but firm. "Effective immediately, per orders from the executive board, Ms. Ford is to be given full priority service. And Ms. Lawson, your presence is required for review upon landing." The bottom dropped out from beneath Tara. She wasn't walking off this plane the same way she had boarded. Tara's breath hitched as the weight of the captain's words settled over her like a lead blanket. The hum of the engines, once a steady backdrop, now felt deafening. First-class passengers exchanged puzzled glances, some leaning forward in their seats, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. But the real moment of reckoning came when Jasmine Ford, who had remained composed through it all, uncrossed her legs, stood up, and stepped into the aisle. "I think it's time for full transparency," Jasmine said smoothly, her voice cutting through the thick tension like a blade. She turned toward Clint Eastwood, who gave her a knowing nod before reaching into his jacket and pulling out a crisp envelope embossed with the airline's golden insignia. He unfolded it slowly, deliberately, letting the anticipation simmer before reading aloud. "As of today, Ms. Ford has acquired a controlling interest in this airline." A gasp rippled through the cabin. Tara staggered back a step, her mouth opening, but no words came out. Jasmine's gaze never wavered. "You see, Ms. Lawson, when you made your decision tonight, you weren't just humiliating a passenger," she said, her tone even, but edged with quiet power. "You were disrespecting the woman who now owns the very company you work for." The finality of the words sent a chill down Tara's spine. The same aisle she had confidently walked just hours ago now felt like the longest walk of her life. And Jasmine? She was just getting started. The cool night air brushed against Jasmine's skin as she stepped off the private jet bridge, the city lights of New York glittering like a sea of stars in the distance. The roar of the engines faded behind her, replaced by the hushed murmurs of ground staff, their movements precise and controlled. She inhaled deeply, the scent of jet fuel mixing with the crisp autumn breeze, a reminder of just how quickly everything had changed. Tara Lawson, escorted off the plane minutes before, had disappeared into a waiting office for what would be the most uncomfortable conversation of her life. Her career now hung by a thread, unraveling as swiftly as the bias that had driven her actions. But Jasmine wasn't thinking about Tara anymore. That chapter had closed. She walked toward a sleek black car waiting near the tarmac, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. Clint Eastwood leaned against the door, arms crossed, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Hell of a way to make an entrance, he mused. Jasmine exhaled a quiet laugh. This isn't about me, she said, eyes sharp with purpose. It's about making sure this never happens again. As the car pulled away, the city stretched before her, full of possibilities. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Power doesn't come from a title, a uniform, or a position, it comes from knowing who you are and refusing to let the world define your worth. Jasmine Ford didn't need first class to validate her success. She had already built herself from the ground up, proving time and again that true power isn't about where you sit, it's about how you stand when someone tries to knock you down. Tara Lawson thought she had control, but control based on arrogance and bias is an illusion. She judged Jasmine by the assumptions she carried, never stopping to question if she was making a mistake. And in the end, it wasn't just her job she lost, it was her illusion of superiority. When the walls of privilege closed in on her, she finally understood what it felt like to be powerless. But Jasmine's victory wasn't just about revenge, it was about setting a new precedent. Change isn't always loud or explosive, sometimes, it's a quiet, calculated shift that happens in boardrooms and policy meetings, reshaping the future without ever raising a voice. So ask yourself, when faced with injustice, will you shrink back or rise? Will you let the world dictate your worth, or will you take control of your own story? Because in the end, the lesson is simple, true power isn't about where you start. It's about how you choose to finish. If you love this story, there's so much more waiting for you on Daily Stories, where every episode is packed with powerful lessons, jaw-dropping twists, and unforgettable moments. We bring you real-life inspiration, gripping narratives, and thought-provoking tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't miss out on our latest stories, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Every week, we bring you stories that challenge perspectives, reveal hidden truths, and remind us that every action has consequences. From stories of resilience and redemption to shocking tales of justice and transformation, Daily Stories is your go-to destination for storytelling that leaves a lasting impact. So, if you're ready for more thrilling narratives that keep you thinking long after the credits roll, subscribe now and join us for the next unforgettable journey. See you in the next story.